I thought it would be fun for me and maybe interesting to you if I were to film a walkthrough of the Spirit Keeper's Tarot deck, but from the perspective of the artist and creator of the deck. So that I don't end up with a crazy long video, I will be subdividing this into 3 separate videos. Today we're going to be doing the first video, the Major Arcana. The second one will be 7 parts of the Minor Arcana, Lower Realm. The first thing you might have noticed is that there are 3 key zeros: the Initiate, the Seeker, and the Keeper. So one, you can treat it as 3 different variations of the Fool card. You can choose the one that you like the most and just work with it as a key zero Fool card. If you think about some of the earlier editions of the Thoth deck, it came with several different versions of the Magician card, I believe it was. So in the Initiate, the imagery I wanted to convey here was take a leap of faith. So when you saw it, it had that sense of let yourself be reborn, hence the Orphic egg, that kind of vibe. And take a leap of faith. I have the green man for the concept of spring rebirth, the spring equinox. And then you have a little fox spirit, your friend, that is sleeping here waiting for you to arrive. And all 3 of the key zero cards have that portal gateway look to it because it's about entering into a different dimension, entering into a different world, a different room, palace, space, time, that kind of a feeling that I was going for. And then the Seeker card, this imagery is based on some of the lower chambers of Angkor Wat, or imagined Angkor Wat, the city of temples in Cambodia. And here you see again the fox spirit sleeping, but now way back. Now the fox spirit is inside. You have to go through the portal to go find the little fox spirit. And the white rose, 1 white rose in bloom, 2 still closed buds. I wanted, flying cards. I wanted this idea here to be an offering to the gods. Then you have the Keeper card, Asherah. And here I wanted the High Priestess / Temperance vibe. So that's why I went with the depiction of Asherah here. The Magus card features Himiko, shamanist queen from I think it was the Yayoi period, the Wa, when the Kingdom of Wa, when Japan was called the Kingdom of Wa. This is depicting a female in traditional men's clothing. I think it's called the Binfuku, ceremonial court garb, and it would be traditionally men's clothing, but Himiko, a female shamanist, wearing it. And here in the Priestess card, this is a Gala priestess of Inanna. And the Gala priestesses traditionally were male in traditional women's clothing, or more specifically, priestess clothing. For the patterns, the clothing style, even the jewelry that Himiko is wearing in the Magus, I had to do a lot of archaeological research. I had to employ a couple of friends who were fluent in Japanese to help me out and get the right information so that I could depict the clothing a little bit more historically accurate, but then that's not even the right thing to say because there's a lot that we have reconstructed. We don't really know. But for an artist, that's actually really good news. When we don't really know, artists get really excited because that means I can kind of make it up. The 4 symbols in the corners represent mercury, water, salt, and sulfur. In the Priestess card, you're going to see references from the Thoth. You have the camel, right? And then the gimel. And then you also have the bow of Artemis. So in the Thoth, there was a more prominent emphasis on depicting or representing Artemis's bow in the Priestess card. And here what I've done is I've taken the bow that you actually see Artemis wielding in the 8 of Wands or 8 of Scepters in the SKT. That's the sharpshooter. If you go look at that card shows Artemis with a particular bow. The style and design of that bow is the shawl of the priestess. So that's kind of the Artemis bow representation I've worked in evocation of Thoth. I just also wanted to point out in the Priestess card, there are a few other trans identity specific representations and symbolism references in here that I won't talk about, but I hope you will find and pick out for yourself. I think I'm going way too slow. This video is going to take forever. This is the Empress Wu Zetian, a known historical figure, considered the only female emperor in China's history, as Hotu, the mother goddess, or earth goddess is a better phrasing of that. But she has a mother goddess vibe. Earth goddess is probably the better translation. Oh, and for the reference to Urania and the 12 constellations or 12 zodiac signs on the crown of the Empress, here I've changed it to the 12 zodiac signs in Chinese astrology using Chinese oracle bone script. To draw this card, I fully fleshed out the world. So behind the subject of the Empress, there's the waterfalls. Beyond this gate, there's a whole world. And what I wanted to picture here is the natural world. So there were cliffs and the waterfall, lake, river, was it river lake-ish thing that was going on, lots of greenery, verdant lands. But Mother Nature was what I was going for in terms of the landscape behind the Empress. Here in the Emperor card, we have Menelik I, who is the fabled son of King Solomon. Yes, the biblical King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. And he later went to rule Ethiopia. Here, for so many reasons, you're going to see the Ark of the Covenant. One of those reasons is the legend that King Solomon gave the Ark of the Covenant to his son Menelik I to take care of, and Menelik I brought that to Ethiopia, where the Ark of the Covenant is to this day. Where the background of the Empress card was natural landscapes, natural formations, Mother Earth. In the Emperor card, if you had been able to see the background behind him, it was more of a city landscape. Human constructed, human architecture, cityscape type look behind the Emperor. And so I thought that was a nice kind of dichotomy between the Empress and the Emperor. A lot of the coloring and the patterns you see in the background in both the Empress and the Emperor are also lifted straight out of Crowley's Thoth deck to again give it that reconciliation or synthesis between the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Thoth. Key 5, the Hierophant, formerly the Holy See. I did diverge from the first and second editions, and I returned to the key title, the Hierophant. And here I picture Maitreya, the Bodhisattva. There is a messianic legend that is attached to Maitreya in Chinese Mila Fo. And I thought that would be a really interesting way of depicting the Hierophant, and also the background that you see beyond the two pillars. The gateway here is Tushita Heaven, which is the paradise that Maitreya is currently resident in. Key 6 depicts the Edenic mysteries. You have the Garden of Eden in the background, the angel with the flaming sword. I wanted to use the representation here, and this harkens back to the first and second edition, so there isn't a whole lot of change here, but just to repeat myself, I want to go with the dragon and phoenix. In Western alchemy, the dragon and phoenix is significant in Chinese mysticism and also just cultural symbology. The dragon and phoenix symbolizes the sacred marriage, a sacred union. So you have that, alchemical wedding vibe going on in Key 6, the lovers, right? Also, you'll see the tree of life in the Kabbalah. Malkuth is not pictured. It's not visible, but then is here in the tree of knowledge. Key 7, the Chariot. Depicted here is Eos, Titaness, goddess of the dawn. I believe she's the sister to Helios. Lux e veritas, light and truth. And you will see one of the sphinxes has no mouth but has eyes, can see the truth but cannot speak it. The other sphinx has a mouth but no eyes, can speak the truth but cannot see it. Now, that was very interesting. And then the blind or non-seeing sphinx with the mouth open as if in speech has one leg, has one of its paws stomping on its own tail. It's self-infliction of pain. I believe that when you speak your own truth, oftentimes the consequence of speaking your own truth is self-inflicted pain. Also, in the 3 septenaries of the major arcana, you have key 7, key 14, and key 21. They're the 7th card in each of the 3 septenaries. Here in key 7, you're going to see on the shield, that's on the Chariot, you have the 4 cardinal signs. Later in key 14, the Temperance card, the Angel, you're going to see the 4 mutable signs. And then in key 21, of course, classically, you have depicted the 4 fixed signs. And if you look very closely, although it is quite light, you'll probably need a magnifying glass, but the detailing on the Chariot itself features the Egyptian Book of the Dead, so the vehicle of magic, the vehicle of spellcrafting. In the Roman pantheon, Eos Aurora, the background, although you can't see it anymore in the final image, is the Aurora Borealis across the skies. Key 8, the Force, the Tamed Lion. This is the Strength card. We're following the RWS key ordering. And here the background is very personal. This is upstate New York, Iroquois land or Haudenosaunee land. And this is a very specific location that I remember running to as a child. I would run off, in the summers, go off by myself and find this place. And this is someplace I would just spend a lot of time. And I remember feeling like I could sink my bare feet or my hands, toes and fingers into the soft dirt. And I felt like I was being rejuvenated or being re-energized from the earth itself. And so that was an idea I want to bring to key 8 strength, the Force card. And the idea here also is the picture here, awakening the Kundalini and mixing that in with Western alchemical references. You have the White Maiden and the Red Lion. Of course, the alchemical sun in the background as well. Key 8 is the first card in the 2nd septenary of the major arcana. You'll see that over the Ouroboros or the double Ouroboros, there's the astrological glyph for the North Lunar Node. And then in key 15, which is the first key in the 3rd septenary of the major arcana, that's key 15. The demon card, the devil, there is the South Lunar Node. So there's this sort of correlation and bond between key 8, the strength card, the concept of force and light here, and the concept of force and light in the demon. Yes, light in the demon. And throughout the SKT, every single time you see the squaring of the circle, alchemical symbol, another example that comes immediately to mind would be on the boat in the 6 of Swords card. So this always represents the great work every time you see it in the SKT deck. So also, full disclosure as the artist, one thing that didn't come out exactly as planned, and so you don't see the connection, unfortunately, in terms of the coloring, is, well, first of all, you know that this is the White Maiden and the Red Lion, taming of the Red Lion. The lion didn't come out as prominently red as I would have liked. You'll see the double Ouroboros, the concept of awakening the Kundalini. There's a glow, an aura around the serpent imagery here, and that was supposed to have a more of a red glow, akin to the red glow you're going to see in key 15, the demon card, and the red glow you see in key 19, the warrior card or the tarot sun card. It's very faint, so you don't see it, and so you probably won't make that connection, unfortunately. Key 9, the Erudite, renamed from the classic tarot Hermit card, but you will see the bottom caption, Hermit of the Mysteries, just to anchor those who are more classically trained in the tarot. I wanted to rename this card to the Erudite to call more emphasis to the idea of one who is learned, one who is knowledgeable, the knowledgeable one. And in this particular cultural depiction, we have the learned one, or the erudite, manifesting as an ascetic priestess of Mori. Mori is the supreme god or creator god in the Shona religion. And what's really interesting, what I love about this is after the missionaries came into Zimbabwe, Mori, the term, became synonymous with the Christian biblical God, because I guess when missionaries heard about how people of the Shona religion described Mori. They connected that to the biblical monotheistic God, but it's not exactly a direct correlation, which is really interesting because it's similar to the ancient Chinese concept of Sangdi. And now, if you speak Chinese, Sangdi means the biblical monotheistic God. But once upon a time, it definitely did not. It was this idea of a supreme creator God up in the heavens. But at the same time, internally, everybody of the culture, everybody of that religion understood, even though we conceptualize Shangdi or Mori as one God, we also at the same time understand it to be a pantheistic idea, this idea that everything has Mori in it, everything has Shangdi in it. And it's not male or female. It's kind of this, it's an essence, it's a personification of oneness and divine harmony. But that divine harmony is also what self-governs and rules this world. And so it's just very interesting that it happened in Africa and it also happened in Asia. Key 10, Wheel of Life, the Wheel of Fortune card. This depicts Shai or Shay, Egyptian god of destiny, personification of fate. And the concept, as I understand it here, is Shay is part of us. Shay is within us. We are born with Shay. And the first appearance, I believe, of Shay as a personification of fate and then depicted in the form of a god was the 18th dynasty of Egyptian history. That's around 1500 BC to 1290 something BC. Shay is often associated with the cobra, which is why on his shirt you're going to see the cobra. I was trying to figure out how to work in the serpent reference again, and I was just trying different designs, and none of it really felt balanced in terms of a composition. So it's just really hard to work in, and finally I decided to go with this shirt, even though in terms of cultural depictions of clothing that might not be entirely accurate. But I figure we're all talking about gods and goddesses here right now, and this is obviously a mythical space, not even rooted on planet Earth. So I'm like, oh, I have some creative liberty here. The cobra was also important here because I want to bring in that Greco-Roman or Hellenistic influence in Alexandria, where the cobra was also often depicted to represent a serpent god of fortune telling. Fortune telling, Wheel of Fortune, I thought it was cute. I also wanted to show you the full background that was fleshed out when I was designing this card that didn't make it onto the final composition. Themis, well, key 11, the Chancellor card depicting Themis, the Libran Greek goddess of human ordained law, the interpreter of God's will. In the background, you're going to see quite faintly the Code of Hammurabi inscribed in Old Babylonian. There is the smallest detail here on the heart, on the scales of Mat, that you might miss because it is super tiny. It's a green scarab, and this is a reference to an Egyptian Book of the Dead spell where there's a type of scarab charm that can be crafted that you put with the heart when one dies to allow the heart to be lighter than the feather. So it's just really interesting. So I included that little reference into this card in like a slight, subtle way that you won't pick up on necessarily, but maybe will keep filed in the back of the head. That ultimately, so this is a commentary that I brought up here, right? The concept of justice, but it's human ordained justice. That this idea of fairness, impartiality, it actually doesn't exist. And so that's the reason I added the scarab. It's social or socio-political commentary that ultimately, is there really such thing as truly fair human ordained justice? Key 12, the Outlaw. So this is the Hanged Man card in the tarot. I wanted to rename this to the Outlaw to bring in that concept of somebody who ventures outside social norms and goes beyond what we believe or what we think of as being acceptable. And so this is somebody who is going to experience severe consequences for going beyond social norms and breaking codes, breaking laws. And yet at the same time, we also get the sense that that's the correct path. That's the path of light in this particular instance. So to be the outlaw, to go outside and break social norms and to go beyond what is acceptable, to be non-compliant, that is actually the path of light that is encapsulated in key 12, the Hanged Man. So I wanted to rename it to the Outlaw and also have that kind of Marseille vibe as well, right? Some of the history there. And the key in key 12, the Outlaw, there's a polarity here to the Chancellor, key 11, the Justice card. So key 11 and key 12 are side by side. The Chancellor shows the bounds of law, working within the system, working within the bounds of law, whereas the Outlaw is about going beyond that, challenging orthodoxy, challenging established law. There's also a dichotomy, tension, and balance between key 5, the Hierophant card, and key 12, the Hanged Man card in tarot, the Outlaw here. And that's because key 5 is essentially some form of institutionalized religious doctrine or dogma, whereas key 12, there's this idea of personal gnosis. There's this idea of a more heterodoxic path. I'm making up words now. Key 13, the Reaper card, Passage to Initiation. So here you're going to see a very prominent reference to Serket, the Scorpion goddess, but also, of course, Scorpio, the astrological correspondence to Key 13, the Reaper card. And here, in terms of slight differences in the art from this and the design from this card or this edition from the first and second edition, is I went from like Graveyard of Bones, which is a little bit more Marseille, right, to just the crown. And the crown here is based loosely on the crown of Charlemagne, with the crown of Charlemagne holding very particular symbolism. So there's many, many reasons for that. One of them being prophetic. It's part of the revelation of this deck. Underneath the dominant layer of interpretation that's classic to Q13, the Death card, in this particular depiction of the Death card, the tarot archetype, I also wanted to express that wisdom requires emotional detachment, and the crown of Charlemagne here is also symbolic of material attachment. Key 14, the Angel card, the double-headed Resbina. So Resbina, and I'm pronouncing that wrong. The R, you need to have that tongue roll, which I can't even physiologically do, so bear with me here. It's the concept of the work product of the divine genius. So here you have a divine higher genius. The idea here is the alchemical magnum opus, which requires the unity of opposites. And the reason it was so important for me to evolve the angel card from its previous depictions in the first and second edition to the double-headed angel is to bring forth and emphasize this idea that is rooted in both ancient Asian and ancient Greek philosophy, that life is this ongoing war of opposites, and everlasting peace, unus mundus, one world, is a unity of the opposites. And so having the male-female head as one is the idea of the Hieros Gamos, my way of depicting a holy marriage of the god and the goddess, a metaphor of consummation. I think another aspect of that sacred marriage, the unity of opposites that can come through, is how the female is facing the night sky and the male is facing the daytime sky. And it's that idea of the sun and moon, the alchemical sun and moon, and a lot of alchemical engravings from the medieval and Renaissance periods. You're going to see how in the top two corners, or in some way depicting a binary, there's always the alchemical sun and moon. And so that's the idea here as well in the sacred marriage of the Temperance card here called the Angel. And on screen, you're going to see a couple more cards from the deck with that sun and moon motif going on. Oh, and one more thing. I don't know if I'll be able to show this on screen, but the Reaper card and the Angel connect. Key 15, the Demon card. This card was so hard for me to draw and get right because one, I wanted the serpent tail, the goat's head, the human body, and the bat wings. And I wanted all of that to be one to depict the devil card, the demon. But then my drawing skills aren't really that great. Like it's not easy for me to draw at a professional level yet. I'm still a work in progress. And so trying to draw the demon in a way that was not too cartoony and cute in a way, right? Like too cartoony was very difficult. So I worked through so many drafts. I mean, maybe more than 15 drafts of this image to get this just right. Oh my gosh, it was so hard. What I hope you will notice is that the inner light of the demon Baphomet is the same light that you're going to see in the center of Sol Invictus of Key 19, the warrior card, the Tarot Sun card. And I wanted to express as another layer to the sort of classical, sitting below the classical meaning of the devil card in tarot, is this idea that at the heart of it, the demon within, the demon that you are, this concept of shadow is actually incredible intelligence. It's also a form of divine genius. It's the other side of the coin of higher genius, the divine. And there is this beautiful light of knowledge to this, but it might be knowledge attached to ego or knowledge attached to motivations that are not driven by higher ground, higher purpose. So that's kind of the idea. Or it's intelligence and genius that's bound by materialism. In one of the earlier videos of this orientation series, I talked about the intentions for this specific deck and how I wanted it to be more proactive and interactive as a tool. And so here you have the chains around the demon, and you have actually the seal, the Solomonic seals on the demon's arms as a form of talismanic or sigil protection baked into the tarot deck, well, specifically this tarot deck, to help you manage and control and tame your inner demon in the event that that is what's coming up. So if there's this idea of needing to tame the ego, needing to tame the materialistic attachments, or knowledge being wielded in ways that are more self-destructive than constructive, there's magic that is going to kind of leap out of this card to help you better tame that inner demon. Here, I hope I am able to show that key 15 and key 16 in this deck are connected by their compositions. This was also in the first and second editions of the Spirit Keepers Tarot. Here in the Tower card, you see a cracked foundation, like the ground is all cracked. This is a terrible place to be building a structure like this. And so it's not just the lightning bolts coming from atop destroying the tower, but this tower was gonna fall anyway, right? Because look at the foundation that it's built upon. And I wanted to bring that to light as well. It's not just that sort of divine intervention or the force majeure that's coming in. I mean, this was never gonna last anyway, right? The trident, the golden trident in place of the lightning bolt, was also intentional. You're going to see that symbolism. It was in key 12, the Outlaw, on the shirt of the Outlaw, and you're going to see it in Tridevi in the Nine of Chalices, the wish granted. And so that's also intentional as well, that repeated symbolism. I was hoping that this particular composition would express this dual nature of the tower card, or a tower moment in your life. So when a tower moment happens, that shaking of everything that you knew, and it feels like it's the destruction of stuff that you worked so hard to build, that you put in and invested so much of yourself into, that tower moment, of course, is going to feel bad. It's terrible. We have this sense of this is a bad card, right? I mean, there's no denying that. But at the same time, the lightning bolt is breaking the chains from the tower that was connected to the demon card. And again, I showed that the foundation was cracked to begin with. So even if the lightning never came, even if divine intervention never came, This was always destined to fall. The divine intervention, the force majeure that has come down and broken everything you worked so hard to build up, was actually a blessing, not a curse. It was helping you rather than hindering you. Another layer of meaning here I wanted to express in the artwork is that everything happens for a reason. And even though what you're going through right now, the tower moment feels awful and feels undeserved, and just it's a terrible disappointment in your life, a huge setback. This all the work and labor and investment you put to construct something that would seem to you like going in the right direction, just shattered and brought to the ground, to pure rubble. um, that is actually for the greater good. Like it's all toward a greater good so that you can find stronger foundation elsewhere and finally build something that is truly a representation of your great work. This that you were doing, not it, or at least the way you're constructing it is not the right way of construction. Your foundation right from the beginning is off. Key 17, the star card, renamed to the healer. This is in all three editions. I renamed the star, the moon, and the sun, moon, stars in the major arcana to the healer for the star, the necromancer for the moon, and the warrior for the sun. Pictured here is Guanyin Pusa, Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. And in the background, you see a Shinto shrine to the nature spirits. And one of the expressions here that you'll see that is an underlying layer, not the main, it does not go toward the meaning of the star card in the tarot. It's more sort of sitting underneath it that I thought was an interesting implication, is this idea or the expression that you find in Asia. Specifically, the expression is from the Japanese culture, born Shinto, die Buddhist. But that idea, you see it all across Asia, just instead of Shinto being sort of the indigenous folk religion of the region of Japan, you see it as Taoism or different forms of folk religions in other parts of East Asia. So that idea, for example, in Taiwan, you could say born Taoist, but then die Buddhist. You see that same concept in Korea. You see in Korean shamanism and also in Taoist or Mongolian forms of shamanism as well. This one might not be as obvious, but there's a connection between the tower and the healer as well in terms of the background and also the layout of the composition where the subject matters are arranged. They are mirror reflections of each other. A subtext of the tarot star card I've always loved, and its connection to the tower card, is after you have experienced your own cataclysmic tower moment, and you find a way to repair and mend and build yourself back up, it finally opens your eyes to one aspect of your greater purpose or your life purpose, which is to help others who are undergoing the same situation that you had gone through during your cataclysmic event. So once you have made it to the other side of a tower moment, the star card expresses that higher mission of returning and pulling other people out of the rubble. Once you're safe, that's not enough. To truly be able to ascend, you need to go back into the rubble and this time go and help others out of that darkness. And that was one of the aspects I really wanted to highlight in my key 17. And that's why I called it the healer card, because now you are the healer. And of course, there's also embedded into the meaning self-healing. Of course, it's not just healing of others, it's also healing of the self. Key 18, the Necromancer. So I wanted to play on the concept of the moon cycles and resurrection, Necromancer, and the waning crescent moon as the Necromancer's moon. In Western ceremonial magic, you do summonings under the waning crescent moon. Eliphas Levi talks a lot about that, but he's definitely not the only one. You have the feather of Maat and the scales of Maat that is connected to Anubis. Okay, how am I going to explain this? So I have this working theory of the tarot moon card. The way you would traditionally interpret the moon card, it's not the most positive card. It's usually considered a bad omen, mainly because it's tied to the idea of uncertainty. And because it's tied to the idea of uncertainty, things shrouded in the folds of the shadows, not really knowing what's next, it does have that bad omen vibe to it. If you ask a question about the future and the moon card comes up in traditional fortune telling with the tarot, it's usually a bad sign. I have a theory that this concept, that tarot archetype of the moon, uh, that energy, that energy that the tarot moon card encapsulates, is not positive for the lay individual, but is positive for the occultist. And because this tarot deck is created by an occultist for the occultist, it it changes slightly, right? The meaning of the moon card, the energy is the same. I haven't changed the meaning, intention, interpretation, and the energy of the tarot moon card. It's just that this particular energy in the hands of the Magus, in the hands of the occult practitioner, it's a positive power. It's a positive force. It's a force that we use and wield for manifestation because we know how to work with the dark side of the moon. We know how to work with that resurrection energy, whereas that energy can be too potent, that uncertainty can be too difficult to be wielded by the lay individual. And so I wanted that extra layer of meaning to come through in my specific representation of the tarot moon card because of the mission statement of the Spirit Keepers Tarot. P19, the Sun card, renamed to the Warrior. This is Sol Invictus, but also a representation of Apollo and Victoria in the Roman pantheon, or Nike, goddess of victory. Nike and Victoria are a little bit different. They are not equivalents. So this actually went more for a Nike vibe than Victoria. So Invictus actually has Middle Eastern origins, I believe, and it's this idea of the unconquerable sun. I wanted to bring in a little bit of that Mithras cult energy as well. In the arrangement of the three septenaries of the major arcana, key 12 from the second septenary is vertically aligned with key 19, the sun card, the warrior. And so I don't know if you can see this, but you're going to note how one of the beams from the hanged man, the outlaw card, connects into the top of the warrior card. So yeah, that's Sol Invictus and Nike. Key 20, Apocalypse. So I chose to depict in the background, although you can't see it because the main subject covers it, I'm depicting Angkor Wat. And this is part of the prophetic revelation aspect or layer to the SKT 3rd edition. If you know the history of Angkor Wat, I really did a lot of time researching into it and studying it to make sure that the prophecy ran parallel, that I wanted to use this as the metaphor. It will give you a sense of the revelation here in the apocalypse. And of course, apocalypse also means revelation. The double ibis heads for Thoth Hermes is in here as well. You have the Kabbalistic tree of life that is intertwined with the caduceus, and all together kind of gives you the look of DNA sequencing, and I wanted that as well. In terms of just practical interpretations of something that otherwise feels as heavy and profound as key 20, the Judgment card in tarot, and here specifically apocalypse, revelation, what? So how I read it in an everyday reading is when this card comes up for me, it's a message to own up to the consequences of your own action, whether or not that's information you can digest, whether you can hear it, whether it's really difficult to hear at the time. That's the message that comes through. You just have to own up to the consequences of your own action. I often say the Judgment card is a point of no return. And it seems like, oh, why am I so helpless? It's not that you're helpless. Here's the thing. Life, c'est la vie, means that you've done all these things. At some point, you have to pony up for the things you've done. You have laid the groundwork. You made the choices. You made the decisions. Now you just have to lie in the bed that you made. And so the key 20, when I say this is the point of no return, it's not a force majeure, like an external force that comes in a form of natural disaster. Like that's something that was not you. That's a key 16 tower moment. That wasn't something that you brought on yourself. I would never say that. Key 20 has a slightly different implication, right, from that tower-ish idea. I always see key 20 as not necessarily a negative thing either. So whereas key 16 is usually some form of disappointment that is accompanying that situation, you don't have that prophecy or like attachment or forecast of disappointment when key 20 judgment card comes up. It's the consequences, positive and negative. It's about everything coming into play now, the consequences, positive and negative, of your own actions. And that's how I read key 20. It's about the revelation. Everything is about to reveal itself to you. Another little fun tidbit about this particular representation of key 20, the Apocalypse. In the first and second edition of this card image, you will see, like the silhouettes of the people rising from the dead out of the tombs. This is coming from the more classical depictions of key 20, the Judgment card in tarot. That is still here. I have not gotten rid of it, but the silhouettes are translucent and embedded into various aspects of the background. So if you were to take a magnifying glass and you were able to, in theory, see all of the detailing in the back, you will find the silhouettes from the first and second edition. I've just rearranged it in this particular variation of the card. And finally, key 21, the World card, which I have renamed to the New World Order. And it was the New World Order since the first edition, and there are prophetic implications of that as well. Revelation coming out a little more emphatically in this third edition, I hope. So here you have the Book of Revelation for angels in the four corners, the four angels standing at the four corners of the earth. This is the prophecy of the Messiah. You have the pelican piercing its own breast to feed its own blood to her young. And that is, in Christian lore, a representation of the Messiah. You also have the tricolored, for the Tria Prima in alchemy, the tricolored cubic stone prominently featured as a detail in the New World Order or World card. And you're going to find the cubic stone repeated as a symbol or motif throughout the Spirit Keeper's Tarot 3rd edition. So that was the artist deck creator's walkthrough of the major arcana from my deck, the Spirit Keeper's Tarot Revelation edition. In the interest of keeping these videos at a digestible length of time, I'm going to break this up into 3 parts. The next part of this will be going over the upper realm of the Minor Arcana cards.